All right, we've got the breaking 49ers update. This one is really intriguing. According to Tom Pelissero, Robert Saleh is adding Gus Bradley to the San Francisco 49ers coaching staff. This is a former head coach, former defensive coordinator, not just any former defensive coordinator. Gus Bradley was the original DC architect of the Seattle-style defense that Robert Saleh implemented with the 49ers in 2017. From 2009 to 2012, Gus Bradley was Pete Carroll's defensive coordinator in Seattle. So when the 49ers were on their defensive coordinator hunt earlier this offseason, Gus Bradley was one of the candidates that we talked about a lot. And one of the backup candidates, they ended up getting the big fish. The 49ers ended up getting Robert Saleh, which was a huge deal for them. Now they get the best of both worlds. They have Saleh and Gus Bradley, Saleh's former boss, on the coaching staff. So this is big developing news. This comes from Tom Pelissero, who is over at the Super Bowl. Bradley, 58 years old, most recently the defensive coordinator of the Colts. Before that, he was with the Raiders and the Chargers from 2013 to 2016. He was Jacksonville's head coach. Robert Saleh worked under him from 2014 to 2016 as the linebackers coach of the Jaguars. So the relationship goes back to that. Prior to the Jacksonville job, as I mentioned, Gus Bradley was in Seattle, and Saleh was in Seattle in 2013 as a quality control coach. I think that this might even raise the likelihood that the 49ers are able to bring back one of the guys in this wonderful illustration, Dre Greenlaw. This came out today on the San Francisco Standard. A new coordinator, that's Robert Saleh, is adamant about a Fred Warner-Dre Greenlaw pairing. Nick Bosa said that Robert Saleh is very adamant about getting number 57 back. So Saleh was a linebackers coach under Bradley in Jacksonville. And we've grown to know that Robert Saleh has a very keen eye for talent at the linebacker position. And if you go back to shared experience, well, Gus Bradley coached Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright in Seattle. Robert Saleh coached Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright in Seattle. And now KJ Wright is on the 49ers coaching staff, and Bobby Wagner is going to be a free agent, 34 years old. So hey, maybe Bobby Wagner can fit the 49ers if they need another veteran to plug the linebacker spot. I talk about it in this article up on the San Francisco Standard. I talk about the potential 49ers additions at the linebacker level, because I think if you do bring back Dre Greenlaw, the fact that he was only able to deliver 34 snaps last season meant that you enter 2025 still wondering about his durability, which means that you probably have to dip into either the free agent pool beyond Dre Greenlaw, or you're going to have to fortify the linebacker room with a higher pick in the NFL draft. And even then, you're not going to be sure if that player can handle the load that he needs to handle right away. So I think that a veteran with some scheme knowledge would help the 49ers. And now you've got this whole coaching tree and all these coaching connections with Gus Bradley aboard with the 49ers, Robert Saleh aboard, and KJ Wright aboard. You have all these connections that circle back to the glory days of that Seattle-style 4-3 cover 3. And the 49ers are ready to roll. It sounds like they're ready to roll with an all-star coaching staff. You know, anytime that you can get a former head coach on your staff, you're going to say yes. I think in the case of Brandon Staley last year, who's almost certainly not going to remain on the staff because he comes from the 3-4 background, and now the 49ers are doubling down on what initially made this defense great. But in the case of Brandon Staley, he did some good work with the team's defensive backs. He wasn't in a head coaching role. Obviously, some of these coaches have excelled in coordinator spots and play calling spots and play design spots, but not in CEO leadership types of roles that go along with a head job. So there's a reason why they graduated all the way up to a head coaching job at some point, and that's probably because they're really, really good at their coordinator job. So Bradley is a very respected architect of the 4-3, who Robert Saleh is obviously very familiar with because Bradley was his former boss, and now the roles have reversed. Also, what this does is it gives the 49ers some potential continuity if and when Robert Saleh leaves for another head coaching job. There obviously had been, I don't want to call it concern, because you want your guys to get promoted. You want to see success from your coaching staff. You want to see things build up in that type of positive direction. But the 49ers have seen so much brain drain over the course of the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch tenure, especially over the course of the past half decade. And they ran into a brain drain problem when DeMeco Ryans left to Houston. You always do want to have that contingency plan lined up. When DeMeco Ryans was still a youngster on the coaching staff, he was that contingency plan, right? He took over for Robert Saleh after Saleh took the New York Jets job. But after Ryans was hired, the 49ers didn't have that same contingency plan. KJ Wright is somebody that you can look at and say maybe he'll be following the DeMeco Ryans track, because KJ, former linebacker, young mind, bright coaching career ahead of him. But remember, it took DeMeco several years to be ready for that defensive coordinator position. He essentially joined the 49ers, in 2017, 2018, right when the staff was new under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. And it wasn't until 2021 where he was ready to take that defensive coordinator spot after Robert Saleh left. You'd be asking KJ Wright to grab a DC spot before even DeMeco Ryans grabbed the DC spot if Robert Saleh leaves after this year and you were tapping KJ Wright for the promotion. That might be a little ambitious. So now with Gus Bradley on the coaching staff, it seems that the natural next step for him would be a defensive coordinator position. So assuming that this 49ers defense lights it up in 2025, Gus Bradley will be the next in line. And I'm sure that Richard Sherman will have plenty of nice things to say about Gus Bradley, who saw that Legion of Boom blossom under his command back from 2009 to 2012. Then Dan Quinn, the current Washington coach, took over in 2013. Sherman has had plenty of nice things to say about Robert Saleh. He's had plenty of nice things to say about his former teammate, KJ Wright. And the reason that I invoke Richard Sherman's name is because Sherman builds the perfect bridge between these 49ers coaches and the origins in the Seattle-style cover three. Still crazy to me that we talk about the Pete Carroll Seahawks as the forefathers of this current 49ers defense. The hated Pete Carroll Seahawks. I mean, at this time, 10 years ago, the 49ers were reeling. I mean, it was after Jim Harbaugh had been forced out. It was after those Seahawks had essentially ended an era of 49ers football. So this time, a decade ago, the 49ers just loathed everything about that version of the Seahawks. And now they've spent the past 8 years or so hiring and rehiring key members of those Seattle Seahawks, signing key members of those Seattle Seahawks. It wasn't just Richard Sherman. It was Malcolm Smith that the 49ers brought in as well. Brock Coyle. Remember Brock Coyle? He had been with the Seahawks before the 49ers. But Sherman really represents that bridge, and it was a successful bridge that Kyle Shanahan was able to build with Seattle. Remember that there was tremendous respect going back to Kyle Shanahan's days as an offensive coordinator and the Legion of Boom's peak. There was tremendous respect between both of those entities. The Seahawks and Richard Sherman would say that Kyle Shanahan would strain that defense in a way that no other play caller could strain it. And on the other side, Kyle Shanahan said, going against that defense was a huge challenge because the way that the philosophy in general is architected is you've got a defense that does not give up big gains easily. They're going to make you drive down the field in 10 to 20 plays. And the more plays that you can force from an opposing offense, the higher the chance that offense screws it up. I mean, it's just multiply the probability, right? There's a 10% chance of a big negative play on any given snap. Well, if you add more snaps to a sequence, if that defense bends but doesn't break, well, then you just multiply the probability. That likelihood of something catastrophic happening for the offense increases exponentially. And when the 49ers run this defense properly, they generate a lot of takeaways. They led the league in interceptions over 2 seasons before this one in 2022 and 2023. And I'm sure they want to get back there. What I wrote about on the San Francisco Standard is that they have to get back there through the linebacker position. Linebacker truly, truly deteriorated for the 49ers over the past 2 seasons. And that's why Robert Saleh has been adamant about bringing Dre Greenlaw back. I think on top of Greenlaw, they're going to have to sign another linebacker just because you're not sure about the health of Dre Greenlaw. But, I mean, I've shown this a few times over the course of the past couple of weeks. This is the 49ers defense as a whole and the erosion that we've seen. Blue is good and red is bad. The run defense has sunk to number 29. The total defense is sunk all the way down to number 26. So it's very clear why the 49ers are making big changes this offseason, why they're going back to those basics. But look at the linebackers in specific. And I'm going to give this link to Mike. It's the article on the San Francisco Standard. You go ahead and go into the description and check it out. Red is bad. Blue is good. You want to be darker blue and lighter red if you're going to be in the red. But you don't want to be in the red. You'd rather be darker blue in here. That means that your performance is above the league average. In terms of PFF grade, and the linebackers above this dividing line right here are the ones who saw regular playing time for the 49ers. These guys down here didn't have much playing time at all, including Dre Greenlaw. Only Fred Warner was a plus linebacker for this team last season. 89.2 grade. Campbell obviously wasn't good. He walked out on the football team against the Rams. That was a fiasco for San Francisco. D. Winters also, he was okay for the 49ers. I think he might be a fine third linebacker as he continues to develop. But the heartbeat of this team and this defense has been the linebacker position because it binds the defensive line and the secondary together. You go back to the Seattle days where Gus Bradley, Robert Saleh, had KJ Wright, had Bobby Wagner, had a fearsome linebacker unit. You go back to this right here with the 49ers where they had Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw healthy. In 2022, the 49ers actually had Warner, Greenlaw, and Azeez Al-Shire. I mean, I don't think they're ever going to be able to get back to that level, but that was in 2022 the number one defense in football. And I think the main reason they had the number one defense in football was right in the middle of that unit. But they had these two guys right behind. You could see Nick Bosa there on the illustration in the bottom left. So San Francisco is going to be working hard to bring back this linebacking unit because it is very, very intertwined. Strength at this position with the coaching staff that they're building that now includes Gus Bradley. And as soon as you start to talk about former head coaches on a staff, not even as coordinators, you can start talking about a superstar staff. We'll see who else the 49ers bring in. I mean, in 2019, they had a low-key superstar staff on the defensive side of the ball. People didn't realize it yet at the time. But Chris Kasarik, defensive line coach, obviously, he's a complete stud at that position. But they had Joe Woods, future defensive coordinator, as their DB coach in 2019. And what Woods was able to do is he brought in a lot of quarters, cover 4 concepts that he was able to hybridize with the cover 3 and really disguise with the Seattle-style cover 3 that Robert Saleh initially implemented coming over from Seattle. Woods, that was only a 1-year stop. Then he went on to become the defensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns. I think he's still a free agent. Maybe we do see a return of Joe Woods. The 49ers are trying to figure out what to do with that DB coach position. Daniel Bullocks could get a promotion there. You could bring in a DB coach underneath them. But now they have Gus Bradley. So you had Joe Woods and DeMeco Ryans on that 2019 staff under Robert Saleh. That was a supercharged 49ers defense. Ryans left after the 2020 season. Woods left after the 2019 season. Saleh left after the 2020 season. Ryans was promoted to defensive coordinator, but the brain drain began. And now this is the opposite of the brain drain. Now the faucet is pouring some coaching firepower back into the sink for the 49ers with Gus Bradley back in there. And we'll see what they do at that DB position because I do think that they still want to add a coach there because Brandon Staley worked primarily with defensive backs last year in San Francisco. And Staley left a good mark with the 49ers. Remember that they brought in Brandon Staley for related reasons as the hiring of Steve Wilks. They have felt the need over the years to evolve the defense, to make sure that this defense remains on the cutting edge schematically. And so they brought in a guy from the outside and Steve Wilks and tried to get him to assimilate to the existing structure. Obviously didn't work in 2023. And then in 2024, although they ran the internal hire on Nick Sorensen to be the defensive coordinator, they brought in Brandon Staley, who's a Vic Fangio 3-4 guy. Fangio, obviously the defensive coordinator for the Eagles now, going to be coaching in the Super Bowl on Sunday, but they wanted that outside voice to assimilate again with the defense in 2024. And I think some of what Staley brought specifically to the defensive backs was beneficial for the 49ers. There was the entire star concept, right? That Diomede Lenoir executed really well. Should have been a Pro Bowler for the 49ers in the back end. Diomede Lenoir working in between the nickelback position and the outside cornerback position. That goes back to Jalen Ramsey doing that under Brandon Staley with the Rams in 2020. So you talk to any one of the 49ers cornerbacks, and they really liked working under Brandon Staley. And I'm sure some of what he imprinted over his year working specifically with that portion of the football, assuming that he is gone from San Francisco this next season, since I think Robert Saleh is going to want to build his own staff featuring guys like Gus Bradley. But some of that stuff should carry over in a positive way, because it wasn't a bad season at all for the 49ers defensive backs. The problems were elsewhere on this defense. So earlier, I know we were running a show right before I joined where John Gruden said the 49ers should build a statue of Brock Purdy. I know that we're running a lot of 49ers news this morning. Those of you who are watching that show, which got cut off as I was trying to change the title, it was really funny. Those of you who are watching that show will probably recognize this clip, but those of you who weren't, this is John Gruden at the Super Bowl. We'll pivot back to this Gus Bradley discussion in a little bit. But Gruden, speaking of Brock Purdy at the Super Bowl, thanks to our man Brad Graham at the SF Niners.
A lot of different opinions and evaluations on what Brock Purdy is and he isn't. As a coach, offensive guru, what are your thoughts on Brock Purdy?
They should build a statue of him in San Francisco. He covered their ass, man. They gave up 3 first-round draft choices to get a guy they got rid of. You guys have him in Dallas. And this guy's the last pick of the draft. He's taking you to the Super Bowl. He's taking you to the brink. He deserves to get paid, and I'll just leave it at that.
So he said, I'll just leave it at that, but John Gruden really mincing no words. I made the point of this in the earlier show that anybody who knows remotely what they're talking about is agreeing on this, including John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, who are the ultimate decision makers. They've been so complimentary of Brock Purdy, and also they've projected such confidence in their upcoming investment that it really does seem like a fake debate when we talk about Purdy and whether or not he should be paid. Anybody in the know is not debating this. Like this is just stuff that's being tossed around online, which is why I could be so forceful with this. Like 1 + 1 does equal 2. We don't have to pretend that 1 + 1 = 3. And John Gruden went as far as to say that Brock Purdy might have saved Shanahan and Lynch their jobs. And if you look at how things have gone with how well Purdy has played over the past 3 years and how poorly Trey Lance has played whenever he's gotten the chance. I mean, I don't think it would have ended up well if Trey Lance was the 49ers' only option at the quarterback position. They definitely would not have made it to the NFC Championship games and the Super Bowl with him. And then all of a sudden, the resume for Shanahan and Lynch looks a whole lot worse. It's been Brock Purdy carrying this 49ers offense with excellent play, MVP caliber play, probably more deserving of the MVP last season than Lamar Jackson. He was tops in the league in QBR. So Brock Purdy has done that for the 49ers. John Gruden, other football minds like Joe Montana recognize it. And, you know, we've been saying the same thing. We've been very consistent on this for 2+ years. In a way, it is gratifying to see this outpouring happening at the Super Bowl, because it shows that the minds who know what they're talking about, the people who know football, are all in agreement on this particular topic. Anyway, we're going to talk about the massively different setups for Brock Purdy Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts a little bit later. But first, I want to be covering the breaking news is that Gus Bradley is joining the 49ers staff. The 58-year-old former head coach and defensive coordinator, according to Tom Pelissero, will be working under Robert Saleh, who is the 49ers' new defensive coordinator. I would expect them to bolster the 49ers linebackers room because this has been a big deal for both Bradley, who was a linebackers coach before he was a DC with Tampa Bay from 2006 to 2008. So Bradley, just like Robert Saleh, is a big-time linebackers guy. And it just so happens, I promised, I timed this. I knew this was coming, so I timed the article up on the San Francisco Standard today. It just so happens as State of the 49ers Linebacker Edition drops. The link to this and this beautiful illustration can be found in the description. So go ahead and check that out. Can Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw return to their 2022 level if given the chance? The 2022 level was awesome. When we looked at this, obviously it was the number one defense, number two against the run, number two against the pass. But when you looked at a chart like this in 2022, it was dark blue across the starting three. That's because they also had Azeez Al-Shaair, who's gone with DeMeco Ryans to the Houston Texans. Al-Shaair is like the Fred Warner of the Texans. I don't think it's realistic to expect the 49ers to field a linebacking core as good as they had in 2022, but they can start building back up in that direction because things have eroded over the past 2 years. And I think that it's no coincidence that the defense has eroded along with the linebackers. That's how important this position group is. When you run a wide nine, there's going to be bigger gaps in between the defensive linemen. So you're counting on the linebackers to be more explosive and simultaneously physical, which is what's really hard in football. You know, you can ask a guy to be explosive and you could say, okay, cut some weight or let's go with the lighter player and he could run better. But then you're more vulnerable theoretically against the run game because the player is lighter. So you're looking for unicorns at the linebacker position. You're looking for guys who are explosive and physical. You're looking for Dre Greenlaws. You're looking for Fred Warners. You're looking for Patrick Willis's. You're looking for Navarro Bowman's. Those players aren't easy to find. The 49ers have this proud tradition of Hall of Fame linebacker play, literally so in Patrick Willis. Fred Warner's going to be there one day for the 49ers. He is well on track to be a Hall of Famer. So you have this proud tradition of linebacker play that a lot of other teams don't have, especially recently with that position shifting so much and the demands required of it. I mean, you've got Jamien Sherwood as the 49ers target in free agency. He played for the Jets under Robert Saleh. He's 216 pounds. Back when Willis and Bowman played, these were 240 to 250 pound linebackers. So the position has gotten much lighter, and it's been harder for these lighter players to plug gaps in the run game. But that's exactly what the 49ers demand of their linebackers at a higher level because they run the wide nine. A lot of people say, okay, you run the wide nine, you're going to need really, really good defensive linemen, which is true for any scheme. The better the players, the better you're going to run the scheme. But a lot of people forget that the linebacker position might be just as important to running an effective wide nine as the actual down defensive linemen with their hands in the dirt because you're filling the wider gaps out in front. So when the 49ers last had that number one defense, they were turbocharged at linebacker. They had Warner, they had Greenlaw, they had Al-Shaair all delivering sublime seasons. From 2018 to 2019, a lot of people will say, well, the 49ers got edge rushers, which is true. They got Dee Ford and they got Nick Bosa, and that helped Eric Armstead, Walter Payton Man of the Year, congratulations, and DeForest Buckner immensely. But the 49ers also got Dre Greenlaw as a rookie in 2019 to help turbocharge their defense. They also saw the second-year maturation of Fred Warner. So every single time that the 49ers have had an elite defense under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they've had an elite linebacker tandem. Greenlaw and Warner in 2019, and then a trio in 2022, Greenlaw, Warner, and Al-Shaair. Now, you know, Al-Shaair also was around as a rookie in 2019, but by 2022, contract year, the guy was an absolute monster, right? So the 49ers will do their best to rebuild the linebacker position in the mold of that 2022 season. They're not probably quite going to be able to climb back up there, but there's a reason why they're adamant about returning Dre Greenlaw, and then they're going to have to add on top of that because of the durability concerns surrounding Dre Greenlaw. So I write about it all here on the San Francisco Standard. This is the piece. There's a nice picture of Dre Greenlaw, one of his 4 snaps against the Miami Dolphins this past season. Talk about Jamie Sherwood in the piece, who I think is the 49ers' top free agent target. They could get a young guy. I think Sherwood's only 25, 26 years old. Really blossomed this past year with the Jets. But again, he's 216 pounds. I think he might be a good third linebacker for the football team, a safety linebacker hybrid. The 49ers have really looked for players of that type in the past. Greenlaw, when he played his college ball at Arkansas, was the fastest player on Arkansas's defense. They put GPS trackers into players' shoulder pads now so you can get the miles per hour reading. Dre Greenlaw eclipsed 20 miles per hour frequently on the Arkansas Razorbacks defense. This is a guy who played wide receiver back in his day as a high schooler, Pop Warner before then. Greenlaw was a hell of an athlete, offensive superstar, shows up and they figured out, well, this guy can hit people, so we want him as a linebacker, but he flew around just like a DB. I think he was a cornerback at one point in his younger football career. I was just sitting around talking with Dre Greenlaw as he was shooting hoops in the locker room this past season, and he started telling me about his rise through the ranks as an athlete on the football field. I mean, we all think of him as this muscled up enforcer for the 49ers defense, but he's got background playing DB, background playing corner, background playing receiver. He was the fastest guy on that Arkansas defense, on an SEC defense, back when the SEC was the top conference in football. I know that the NIL stuff has probably changed the balance of power in college football, but Dre Greenlaw was faster than college DBs on his team at a linebacker weight, 230 plus pounds. And that's why he fits the 49ers so well, because you need plus linebackers. Fred Warner, I mean, we talk about these safety linebacker hybrids. Fred Warner played a nickelback type of position at college at BYU. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, who's been with the 49ers for several seasons, was a safety at Arizona. D. Winters entered TCU as a safety for the Horned Frogs before he switched over to linebacker. So you can see what the 49ers are doing here. They want range, they want explosiveness, but it's only the guys who are absolutely tough enough that can port that speed and play closer to the line of scrimmage and deliver what the 49ers need to against the run, which is why it's hard to deliver a good run defense. But this is what the team is trying to get back to when it comes to run defense. San Francisco, number 29 and number 26 over the past 2 seasons against the run. This used to be a perennial top run defense, and they need to get back to that because you're not going to have any fun if you don't stop the run. That's the fundamental requirement in football. If you can't stymie opposing run games, you're not going to be able to set up the rush to passer. You're not going to be able to set up the way that the 49ers did in 2022 and before then to intercept footballs. I mean, in 2022, they had, 20 picks in the season. The defensive backfield can take so many more liberties as far as aggressiveness goes against opposing pass games when they have the benefit of a defensive line that is not on its heels. And a defensive line that is not stopping the run is definitely not going to be on its toes. It's going to be on its heels. It's going to be having to react to a run game. If you stymie the run, as the 49ers did, you see the blue in this column from 2019 to 2022, you are going to be ready to attack the pass because you're going to have more obvious passing situations. So everything really is connected. Now, another thing the 49ers are going to have to add here is a cornerback, because number 23 in pass defense in 2021, I'm circling it here, alongside a good run defense. That happened because they were out of corners that year. That's the year they committed all those pass interference penalties. So they signed Charvarius Ward and it moved up to number 2. It's unlikely they re-signed Charvarius Ward this year. So then you wonder who they do bring in. We could look at some of the free agents of the Indianapolis Colts. Why don't we take a look at this? Mike sent me a nice little list of pending free agents in the Colts, because Gus Bradley, he might want to bring in some of his players. Like we talk about Jamie Sherwood of the New York Jets, who played under Robert Saleh. Well, maybe Gus Bradley is going to want to bring in some former Colts players. That was Bradley's former stop. I got to load this picture So we can take a look at these Colts free agents. There we go. These are unrestricted free agents on the defensive side of the ball. Odeyingbo, the edge rusher, might be the most intriguing player on this list. Another one, though, Julian Blackmon. The 49ers hosted Julian Blackmon, the safety, on a visit last year before he signed with the Colts. And I think the 49ers will need a safety, especially if they don't re-sign Talanoa Hufanga. So there are many positions of need for the 49ers on their defense. I can give you guys a look at the roster right now just so you can have a quick look at what's going on for San Francisco defensively. Look at this. These are like wide swaths of roster spaces that the 49ers need to fill. So you need to sign more linebackers. You only have 3 under contract. You need to sign more corners. And I think that given safety uncertainty, no Talanoa Hufanga under contract for 2025 at least yet, you're going to need more there. The only place where you have enough guys to run a team right now under contract is defensive line, but I think you're going to want upgrades. I think Odeyingbo would bring that at one of the edge rushing spots. I mean, we're still talking about Myles Garrett too, but let's be honest, that's more of a long shot for the 49ers. A lot would have to happen for a superstar acquisition like that to work out. Probably more likely when we look at potential free agents from teams where 49ers staffers have coached. And Gus Bradley, as the coordinator of the Colts, coached these guys who are pending free agents with the Indianapolis Colts last year. E.J. Speed at linebacker, Blackmon, the safety, who worked out for the 49ers, but they didn't sign him. He ended up re-signing with Indianapolis. Taven Bryan, a defensive tackle, made $2 million this past year. There's Odeyingbo, David Long, cornerback, Ronnie Harrison, Trevor Denbo. And then you've got a lot of minimum contract guys, Grant Stewart and Trey Flowers, all scheduled for free agency, although restricted free agency for Denbo, the safety. If you want to go to the Jets roster, that's where Robert Saleh comes from. Well, Javon Kinlaw, unrestricted free agent coming up. Solomon Thomas, we saw him on the stage yesterday as a Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee for the New York Jets. He should also be a free agent in March. DJ Reed, former 49ers cornerback, also with the Jets under Robert Saleh. That might be somebody the 49ers bring in to try to fill in that gap at the cornerback position. And then, of course, with the New York Jets, you've got Jamie Sherwood, who I talk about in this article with the 49ers linebackers, the state of the linebackers piece. But the thing with Sherwood is that Jeff Ulbrich, who was Saleh's defensive coordinator under the Jets, with the Jets, under Saleh, Ulbrich and Saleh would work together on the game plans. Jeff Ulbrich is now the defensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons. So it stands to reason that Ulbrich is going to want somebody like Jamie Sherwood because he worked with him. So the 49ers and the Falcons might both be interested in a veteran linebacker from the Jets, and that's going to make it difficult. Last year, the 49ers had a fight over scraps at the linebacker position to find their veteran reinforcement for Dre Greenlaw, and I think they're going to want a veteran reinforcement again this season. Ideally, you want D. Winters to enter the season as your fourth linebacker, if you can, if you're the 49ers. And last year, they tried to get Eric Kendricks. Kendricks verbally agreed, didn't sign a contract, signed with Dallas instead. That led the 49ers to get their second option. That was Devondre Campbell. Obviously, that didn't work out for San Francisco, and the rest was history when Devondre Campbell refused to play against the Rams, and the 49ers kicked him off the field and suspended him for the end of the season. So how are the 49ers going to avoid that? Well, you probably want a younger, hungrier player. But if you want a younger and hungrier player who also is established in this league, well, you're probably going to have to pay a little bit more in free agency, maybe a lot more in free agency. So somebody like Jamie Sherwood might be that player. I mentioned in this State of the Linebackers piece that Bobby Wagner, who still is playing good football, he may not be the cover linebacker that he used to be as he enters his mid-30s, but Bobby Wagner was a great veteran presence for Washington this past season. And if we talk about Gus Bradley now joining the 49ers staff, and we talk about Robert Saleh on the staff, and we talk about KJ Wright on the staff, well, Bobby Wagner was co-linebackers with KJ Wright playing under those coaches in Seattle. And that could be a ideal third linebacker to bring in. If Bobby, I mean, one issue with Bobby Wagner is it was him and Frankie Louvu, right? The youngster for Washington who kept on jumping over the line of scrimmage against the tush push. Just a missile, though. Frankie Louvu did some nice stuff on film, although he missed a lot of tackles this season. You wonder if Bobby Wagner is ready to relegate himself to a second or third linebacker role just to finish out his career and maybe go ring chasing one more time with a lot of familiar faces. If you can't, if Jamie Sherwood is out of your budget because the Atlanta Falcons are willing to pay him more to be a linebacker reinforcement on top of Warner and Greenlaw, maybe somebody like Bobby Wagner would be a cheaper fit for the 49ers at the tail end of his career. But it could be that somebody like Bobby Wagner obviously will look at his game and say, no, I still have a lot left in the tank. I'm still performing. And I wouldn't blame him if he said that. To me, it's just going to be really interesting to see who exactly the 49ers target in the aftermath of the Devondre Campbell fiasco, because they went with the best veteran they could find without really, they just went for the mercenary last year, and they unfortunately paid the price for that when Campbell refused to play in that game against the Rams. So they're probably going to vet a little bit more diligently this offseason. They're probably going to have a lower or a higher barrier to entry for that veteran reinforcement linebacker job. Those of you just joining, Gus Bradley has joined the 49ers staff. I haven't been on Twitter here in a few minutes since we started this show, but I'll go check that out in a little bit. We're going to open up some questions here on another 49ers Live. Go ahead and check out that article up on the San Francisco Standard. Perfect time to discuss the 49ers linebacker position. '49ers Q&A. We got a D Winters fan. I think that D, and I talk about it in the article, D made a lot of progress this past season, and maybe the 49ers will be very reliant on D Winters this year. I also know that Robert Saleh is adamant that they bring back Dre Greenlaw. Is D Winters going to be the backstop to Dre Greenlaw? So third linebacker D Winters, you're confident with him being the second linebacker in case Dre is unavailable at any point? Because I think you do have to have that backup plan. If the 49ers are comfortable with that, great. I don't know who their four would be. Maybe they bring back Curtis Robinson, who tore his ACL. Maybe Jalen Graham can be the answer for the 49ers there. Maybe they just let it fall off the cliff if they have a linebacker injury. Sometimes that's the risk that you have to take in the NFL. I really think that the best way to fortify the team, if you're able to financially do it, is re-sign Dre Greenlaw and bring in another veteran on top of that. All right, guys, let's put in some good questions into the comment section. And while you're at it, go ahead and hit the like button. That's always a good idea. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. That's an even better idea. And go ahead and check out the link in the description to go look at this article on the San Francisco Standard. As Chuck says in the 559, where I'm flying to tomorrow, smash that like button. Yes. Kyle says that Bosa is about to go hunting in 2025. Bosa can be in that position that rushers like Cliff Averill were in with the Seattle Seahawks, working alongside Gus Bradley, Robert Saleh, and KJ Wright. No more Richard Sherman, though. When am I having a meet and greet in Visalia? Well, I'm not going to be in Visalia on this trip, but maybe we could do a meet and greet in May in Visalia or Fresno. How about that? How about for my birthday? You guys want to do my birthday with me? Be at Lombardi herself to show up at a bar somewhere in Visalia or Fresno? Would Fresno be okay, or would Visalia be preferable for you guys? Should do it up in Shaver Lake. Have everybody drive up to Shaver Lake. Although I think that's a little too far out of people's way. That would be fun though. We'll do that at some point this spring. If there is demand for a meet and greet in the 559, give me a thumbs up in the comment section, and I will oblige. Myles Garrett talked today. Mike, do you know about this? He describes the Niners as a landing spot. I know the Niners are a landing spot potentially for Myles Garrett if the Browns decide that they want to trade him. The Browns need to wise up, though. The Browns need to – Andrew Berry, their GM, I get it because he's on very thin ice, and if he does trade Myles Garrett, he is essentially acknowledging that his version of the Browns has failed to achieve what he's been trying to achieve, and it might be the end for Andrew Berry, the GM there. Myles Garrett has basically called out the Browns and said, you guys aren't contenders, I want out. He has publicly embarrassed the GM, and the Browns are in preservation mode right now. Their current leadership is in preservation mode right now, and they're saying, no, we're not going to trade him. It's what they also have to do to preserve any sort of value here for Myles Garrett. You don't want to go out and say, oh, yeah, we're going to trade him, because then you lose a little bit of leverage on your end. You want to make it seem like you need to be blown away by an offer, even if you are planning to trade him. But that is the prerequisite for this to even become a possibility for the 49ers. The Browns have to be willing to wheel and deal. I think it's best for the Browns because the offense is devoid of talent. They're aging along an offensive line that used to be really good. The defense has been solid, but it's not a world-beating unit. It might have been for a stretch of 2023. They were really good over that early portion of the season when the 49ers played them in week 6. But this is not a team that is a quarterback away from a a star quarterback away maybe, but they're not going to get a star quarterback, right? This is not a team that is just a solid quarterback with a pulse away from contending. This is a team that doesn't have draft capital, that needs a big infusion of that. It needs to bring in some younger players. They haven't drafted well under Andrew Berry, their GM. Players like Myles Garrett and Joel Bitonio all showed up before Andrew Berry was in charge of the Browns. So they need a reset. They need the draft capital that's going to come from trading somebody like Myles Garrett. I think Myles Garrett sees that and he says, hey, your rational move is to trade me. My rational move is to ask for a trade because I want to go win a Super Bowl. It's not going to happen here within the next couple of years. I want to do that in my prime. So the time is now for Myles Garrett. I look at the Rams who want to trade Cooper Kupp, who seem to be flirting with a Matthew Stafford trade. And that's controversial from the Rams' perspective because they've actually won a Super Bowl with those guys and they were deep in the playoffs with those guys this year. But that's what the Browns should be thinking like. The Browns should be taking the Rams approach and saying, hey, we got some value here with veterans. Why don't we salvage that value while we can before it's too late? The Rams are willing to pick up some of Cooper Kupp's contract just so they can get draft picks for him. It sounds, according to Kelly Stafford, who seems to talk a lot, maybe more than the Rams would like on podcasts about this kind of stuff, but seems that the Rams are shopping Matthew Stafford. They're trying to salvage draft capital here because I think that there is a recognition on the Rams' part that they're not going to win a Super Bowl with this group, that this might have been their last chance. And, you know, even this season, they did make it far. They were not that far off from tying the Eagles at the end, or what was the final score of that game? Were they down by 7? Were they down by 6? I know it was close. It was close in the snow. They didn't quite get it. But think about how the Rams got there. It took a collapse from the NFC West. Nobody was good in the NFC West this past year. Like the Rams were the best out of a relatively mediocre bunch in the division. It's not like they're a juggernaut on the Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, or even 49ers level on a year in, year out basis. I think it is smart for Sean McVay to say, hey, I need to continue stocking and a roster that it's impressed with its youth, but continue stocking that for the future. If he does trade Matthew Stafford and he gets a nice haul in return, well, he can continue building around a mid-price quarterback, and then he can take a swing in the draft. I see what the Rams are doing, and I say maybe the Browns need to adopt the Rams' more forward-thinking outlook. Because as of right now, the Browns say that they're not willing to trade Myles Garrett. Stacy, thank you. This is awesome. You've learned a lot about the 49ers through the channel. I really, really appreciate that. What a nice little message. Thank you for that. You are the best. Ella says that Cooper Kupp is a perfect fit with Purdy, so it's a smart business move for a one-year deal. Yes, he might be. I mean, Cooper Kupp is a quarterback's best friend because, I mean, he's a technician, right? He's a coach in the receiver room. He's going to make sure that not only he does things perfectly correctly, but that his teammates do things right. That being said, the Rams have contractual control over Cooper Kupp, and I don't think they're going to send him anywhere near the NFC West. That's the Myles Garrett thing. If the Browns decide to wise up and trade him, which they still have a lot of time to do, they're on the opposite side of the country, on the opposite side of the league from the 49ers. It's a lot more likely that the Browns send Myles Garrett the 49ers way than the Rams send Cooper Kupp the 49ers way. NFL equals not for long. Yes, this is a very, very quick turnaround league. This is a good point, too. The 49ers needed a break. The past 5 years have been a marathon. You want to do a meetup in Shaver Lake? Hell yeah. More thumbs up if you want to meet up in the 559. Or if you want to meet up in San Francisco, you can give me 2 thumbs up. Elia, sorry, I thought it said, I think it's Elia, right? My bad. I was saying Ella earlier. Yeah, Elia, my bad. We got Sherman and Bobby Wagner was a Ram, so I'm going to dream. Yes, but both of those guys were free agents when they signed with teams within the NFC West. The Rams aren't just going to let go of Cooper Kupp. The whole point of this and the fact that it seems they're willing to pick up some of Kupp's salary, I think it's about $20 million for the next couple of years, is because they want draft picks. This is a fire sale to accumulate draft capital. And when that happens, it's much less likely that player is going to be in the division, remain in the division. My birthday's on Cinco de Mayo, although I'm not sure if I'll be in California on the day of my birthday. The Cosmopolitan Bar and Grill in Fresno. Great food. Have you heard of Five, the kind of Californian Italian restaurant in Fresno? That one's good as well. Those of you just joining, the 49ers are bringing in Gus Bradley to the coaching staff. All-star coaching staff for the 49ers is forming on the defensive side of the ball. And following years of brain drain on that side of the ball, I would say they can use the all-star coaching staff. Remember that San Francisco lost Robert Saleh, lost D'Amico Ryans, lost somebody like Joe Woods. When those coaches left, they also took some staffers with them to their new destinations. And it turned into a point where the 49ers didn't know who to promote after D'Amico Ryans left. And that meant they had to go outside for Steve Wilks. 0 for 2 in their last 2 defensive coordinator signings with Wilks and then Nick Sorensen. So now they're loading up on the defensive brain power again. Instead of there being a brain drain, there's a brain flow. The 49ers have Gus Bradley, former head coach of the Jaguars, but most importantly, Bradley and his experience, he was the original architect of the Legion of Boom. Him and Pete Carroll, 2009 to 2012. Carroll, the head coach. Gus Bradley was the defensive coordinator. Then Bradley was hired by Jacksonville to become their head coach. That was 2013 to 2016. He's been a coordinator in a few spots since then. Now he's going to be working under Robert Saleh with the 49ers. We talked about Pete Carroll before the 49ers hired Saleh and before the Raiders hired Carroll. But you go back to 1977. Pete Carroll was a graduate assistant in college ball under Monty Kiffin, who passed away this year. They showed him up at the NFL Honors yesterday amongst those who have left us over the past year in the football community. But Monty Kiffin was the architect of the famous Tampa 2 defense. When he was coaching at Arkansas, Carroll learned under him as a graduate assistant, took a lot of defensive concepts from Kiffin and the Tampa 2, and then later hybridized those with what he learned from George Seifert. There was a meeting at a point in the 1990s at the NFL Combine between a younger Pete Carroll and George Seifert, the great 49ers defensive coordinator turned head coach after Bill Walsh. And that led to Carroll being hired as the 49ers defensive coordinator in 1995. He was there for 2 seasons, and the 49ers, who are running a 4-3 front ever since Seifert had taken over as their defensive coordinator. 4-3 front with a position called the Elephant. Fred Dean, the great pass rusher, was the first Elephant. They traded for him back in 1981. Hall of Fame player that helped the 49ers win their first Super Bowl after they brought him in midseason trade with the San Diego Chargers. Players like Fred Dean and players like Charles Haley ran the Elephant. Well, Pete Carroll adopted the Elephant package, 4-3, hybridized it with the Tampa 2 concepts that he learned under Monty Kiffin, and led the 49ers to be the top defense in the league while he was their coordinator in 1995 and 1996. Carroll later was the head coach of USC. We know the dynasty that he built there in college. And then he went to the Seattle Seahawks. So all that Pete Carroll worked on over his football life culminated with his job in Seattle, where he built and implemented that Seattle-style cover 3, which can be traced back to the 49ers 4-3 under George Seifert. They even changed the name of the Elephant to the Leo edge rushing position. Well, I talked about Cliff Averill earlier. He was the Elephant or the Leo for Seattle from 2009 to, 2013 or whenever Cliff Averill was finished playing. He was a big-time edge rusher on the Super Bowl team. On that Seattle staff was Gus Bradley, Robert Saleh. On the Seattle roster, Richard Sherman, KJ Wright, all players and coaches with Seahawks 49ers crossover. So the fact that the 49ers are now bringing in Gus Bradley only reinforces the crossover, and hopefully you like that history lesson that starts with San Francisco native Pete Carroll. College of Marin alumnus, Redwood High School, not the Visalia Mount Whitney Redwood High School rivalry, Redwood High School in Larkspur. Pete Carroll was actually classmates with Robin Williams at both the College of Marin and at Redwood High School in Larkspur. So this is a San Francisco native who has produced a lot for the 49ers defense, despite not coaching for the 49ers in about 30 years. He was last there in 1996. I think it's a really cool history lesson that keeps on coming full circle now that Gus Bradley is going to be joining Robert Saleh's staff with the 49ers. You like the staff the 49ers are putting together? Well, yeah, there's simply much more firepower on the 49ers defensive staff than there was last season. That much I could say for sure. Mike asks, if I was the GM, would I go after Max Crosby or Myles Garrett? Hell yes, I would. What would it take to get it done? I've talked about free agents in the past, and I'm going to dedicate a show to more specific free agent discussions. Jamie and Sherwood at linebacker is a good one. I would also talk about DJ Reed, Julian Blackmon. I would go after former Bradley Saleh players. I would go after guys with system fits who you're comfortable with, so you don't have another Devondre Campbell situation. I know that Kyle Shanahan and Campbell had overlapped in Atlanta back in 2016, but that was a long time ago and also wasn't on the same side of the ball. So DJ Reed at corner, Julian Blackmon at safety, Javon Kinlaw. I think somebody like Javon Kinlaw, somebody like Solomon Thomas as rotational pieces, a defensive tackle, Thomas maybe playing a little bit of defensive end. These guys that you're paying a couple million a year would be good investments for the 49ers. But if we're talking about big fish, yes, Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, you never say no. 49ers history is littered with massive edge rusher trades, either for better or for worse. They traded for Fred Dean, who actually never lifted weights, but still dominated people. He would smoke cigarettes in the 49ers weight room. Epic stories from the early 1980s. They traded for Fred Dean in 1981, and that led to a Super Bowl title, led to 2 Super Bowl titles. He won in 81 and 84. Fred Dean was their Nick Bosa in 81 and 84. That was a massive, massive acquisition. And then they traded Charles Haley away to the Cowboys. It's a move that Eddie DeBartolo Jr. still regrets. In 1992, it led to 2 straight Super Bowls for Dallas. The 49ers couldn't get over that hump until 1994. So, and then they acquired Nick Bosa through the draft in 2019, and that led to an era of prosperity. It's such an important position. So when you talk about guys like Max Crosby or Myles Garrett, hell yes, 2 thumbs up. Those are players you go after if you're the 49ers. It's as simple as that. But the teams that they're currently with have to be willing to trade. The Browns, as of right now, say that they're not willing to trade. The 49ers in the past have offered more than the Bears did for Khalil Mack in 2018. But Mark Davis of the Raiders didn't want to trade Khalil Mack. He was with the Raiders at the time. I don't know, to the 49ers. He didn't want to trade him to the 49ers. He was fine trading him to the Bears. I think we might be in a similar situation with what we're dealing with right now with Max Crosby. And I think that the Raiders are also a team that seems to be on the up and up with Tom Brady's part ownership and with the hiring of Pete Carroll. I don't know if they're going to be in the mood to let go of a really good edge rusher in Max Crosby. So that doesn't seem very realistic to me. I think Myles Garrett might ultimately turn into a more realistic possibility for the 49ers. Speaking of John Gruden, who was the coach of the Raiders when they traded Khalil Mack, this is what he said about Brock Purdy today at the Super Bowl.
A lot of different opinions and evaluations on what Brock Purdy is and he isn't. As a coach, offensive guru, what are your thoughts on Brock Purdy?
They should build a statue of him in San Francisco. He covered their ass, man. They gave up 3 first-round draft choices to get a guy they got rid of. You guys have him in Dallas. And this guy's the last pick of the draft. He's taking you to the Super Bowl. He's taking you to the brink. He deserves to get paid, and I'll just leave it at that.
How about that? Thanks to Brad Graham at SF Niners. It's getting great content at the Super Bowl in New Orleans this week. Brad works really hard. Definitely give him a follow. If you want more Brad on the show, let me know. We're going to talk about the massively different setups for Purdy, Mahomes, and Hurts. I had started a show. Some of you might have seen a part of it, and then this Gus Bradley news dropped. So I had to abandon that show, which is fine. But I started the show, and we are having this great discussion about Brock Purdy and company based on what John Gruden said. But I think we're going to have to wrap up that discussion at some other point because it's too good to be overshadowed by what we're talking about here. But news always comes first, and the 49ers have brought Gus Bradley aboard. This show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/gameon today. That's rocketmoney.com/gameon. rocketmoney.com/gameon. Everybody, thanks for watching. We're going to have much more coming up. We got to talk about Purdy, Gruden. We got to talk more about Gus Bradley. But while you're here, before we finish, make sure to check out the San Francisco Standard. That's John Gruden. That's not the Standard. This is the San Francisco Standard. A new coordinator is adamant about a Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw pairing. That is Robert Saleh. But there's another coordinator on the staff that may be just as adamant about it, and that is Gus Bradley, whom Robert Saleh is bringing in. Everybody enjoy. We'll talk to you soon.